On the quiet streets of Alaska, it seemed like just another ordinary day. Until suddenly a young woman appeared. She was barefoot, shackles still clinging to her wrists, screaming as she ran into the road. Panicked and desperate, she used every last ounce of strength just to survive. But this was not just an escape. This was the beginning of a horrifying truth finally breaking through the shadows. And behind it all stood a man more calculated, twisted, and merciless than anyone could imagine. Robert Hansen. By day, he was just a simple bakery owner. But by night, he became a predator, hunting his victims in the wild, unforgiving forests of Alaska. A nightmare that would forever be remembered as the Butcher Baker. If stories like this captivate you, join our community, hit subscribe, and don't miss the darkest chapters of true crime history. Robert Hansen was born in 1939 in a small town in Iowa. From the very beginning, his life was marked by hardship. He was painfully shy, stuttered when he spoke, and his face was scarred with severe acne, enough to make him the target of relentless bullying. Because of his short stature and withdrawn nature, he spent his school years in isolation. He had no real friends, and girls constantly rejected him. This rejection cut him deeply, and so he sought an escape, turning to hunting and archery. But this was more than just a hobby. Over time, it became the stage for his darkest fantasies. While stalking animals in the woods, Hansen began to imagine a day when he could take revenge on the women who had humiliated him. His rage eventually spilled over. In 1960, Hansen took a terrifying step. Fueled by the hatred he carried since high school, he set fire to a school bus garage. He was arrested for arson and sent to prison. At that time, he was already married, but his wife abandoned him while he was behind bars. Behind prison walls, doctors diagnosed him with manic depressive disorder. He also suffered from schizophrenic episodes. Psychiatric reports described his personality as one shaped by a craving to inflict pain and establish dominance over others. For Hansen, losing his freedom was an unbearable humiliation, and that obsession would one day drive him down an even darker path. Robert Hansen's life took an unexpected turn in 1963. That year, he married Darla Hansen, a devout woman and a teacher who seemed like a brief ray of light in Robert's troubled world. But appearances can be deceiving. His past petty crimes and dark tendencies refused to let him go. Not long after, the couple moved to Anchorage, Alaska. There, Robert opened his own bakery, carried on the family trade, and became a father of two. From the outside, they looked like a normal, stable family. Neighbors described him as quiet and withdrawn, but in the hunting world, he was a legend. He broke multiple local records in archery and hunting, and in 1971, he set a world record by taking down a massive Dall sheep with a bow. Yet Alaska's wild frontier held more than just natural challenges. The construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline brought an influx of strangers, sex workers, dancers, and laborers chasing fast money. Amidst this chaos was a young girl, 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. She had come to Anchorage with her boyfriend and was surviving by dancing and working the streets. And one day, her path crossed with a man whose small stature and quiet demeanor made him easy to overlook, Robert Hansen. That encounter would plant the seed of one of Alaska's darkest nightmares. Cindy's nightmare began on June 13th, 1983. That day, Robert Hansen pulled over on the side of the road and offered the young girl $200 to get into his car. Cindy knew the dangers of trusting a stranger, but she needed the money. Hesitant, she accepted and stepped inside. Her hesitation had been right. Almost immediately, Robert drew a gun and forced her into handcuffs. As he drove toward his house in Muldoon, Cindy, under constant threat, had no choice but to obey. Inside the house, things became even more terrifying. Robert chained Cindy in the basement and began to abuse her. But the most chilling part was his disturbing calmness. At one point, he even laid back on the couch and drifted into a comfortable sleep. When he woke, he proudly showed Cindy his hunting trophies. That's when she realized, if Robert was revealing his true self, it meant he had no plans to let her live. Escape was now her only option. If she got a chance, she had to take it. Robert later forced Cindy back into his car, heading toward a remote cabin near the Nick River. To get there, he planned to use his personal plane, parked at Merrill Field Airport. While Robert loaded the plane, Cindy sat in the back seat, still handcuffed. He warned her not to move, or he would shoot. But when Robert turned his back, Cindy saw her only chance at survival. First, she shoved her blue sneakers under the seat, leaving behind proof that she had been there. Then she bolted. Barefoot, shackled, she ran toward the nearest road. Robert chased after her, waving his gun, but just as he was about to catch her, a truck driver spotted the scene. He stopped and pulled Cindy into his vehicle. Seeing her escape, Robert abandoned his plan to fly and fled the scene. The truck driver tried to persuade Cindy to go to the police, but traumatized, still in handcuffs, she begged to be dropped off at the Mush Inn motel instead. There she pleaded with the clerk to let her call her boyfriend, who was staying at the Big Timber motel. Cindy's nightmare wasn't over yet, but for the moment, the real danger was no longer beside her. The truck driver, still shaken from encountering a barefoot, handcuffed girl, dropped Cindy at the Mush Inn motel and immediately alerted the police. Anchorage officers soon found her there, still in shackles, exhausted, and alone. Through tears and desperation, Cindy told them what had happened. She had been kidnapped by Robert Hansen. She described his car, his house, his gun, and even the small plane he had planned to use. But despite all these concrete details and evidence, the police did not believe her. They knew Robert. They often stopped by his bakery for free pastries and coffee. To them, he was a quiet family man, shy, helpful, friendly, and a respected hunter. That image blinded them to the truth. Instead, they accused Cindy of exaggerating. They painted Robert as nothing more than a customer angry at a woman who hadn't fulfilled her part of a deal. The police's lack of empathy and their prejudice against Cindy's line of work meant they failed to protect her life. They dismissed Robert's potential for violence and closed the case. The truth remained hidden, buried beneath the comforting illusion of a harmless man, a man the system allowed to walk free, right in front of their eyes. The horrors Cindy endured were not unusual for Alaska. At that time, disappearances and murders were rising at a chilling pace across the state. Alaska State Trooper Detective Glenn Floths was a key member of the team investigating this disturbing wave of killings around Anchorage. The first body was discovered by construction workers along Eklutna Road. Because she could not be identified, she became known as Eklutna Annie. Soon after, the remains of Wen Messina were found in a gravel pit. Near the Knik River, a buried foot was uncovered, believed to belong to Sherry Morrow. The wounds on all three victims bore striking similarities. They had been shot with a rifle. Floth became convinced that a skilled, methodical serial killer was hunting in the area. The victims were all vulnerable women, sex workers and dancers. To catch the killer, Floth sought help from the FBI. Special Agent John Douglas worked on the psychological profile, describing a man with low self-esteem, deep hatred toward women, a speech impediment such as stuttering, and a tendency to keep trophies from his victims. With the FBI profile in hand, investigators narrowed their list of suspects. Floth carefully combed through the names and eventually connected Robert Hansen with Cindy's testimony. Unlike other officers, Floth did not shy away from digging deeper into Robert's life. Searches of Robert's property revealed terrifying evidence: jewelry belonging to victims and a flight map hidden behind the headboard of his bed, marked with more than 20 X's. Several of those marks matched the exact locations where bodies had already been found. As investigators followed the other marks, more victims began to emerge. Just 4 months after Cindy's escape, Robert Hansen was finally arrested. But as the investigation widened, the shocking scale of his crimes, spanning more than a decade, was brought to light. When investigators dug into Robert Hansen's past, they found that in December of 1971, he had been arrested for 2 separate crimes: assaulting a housewife and attempting violence against a sex worker. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served only 6 months. These light punishments did nothing to curb his dark urges. By 1972, the killings had begun. At first, his attacks were random, but Robert quickly realized he needed to be more strategic. Anchorage was full of runaway teens and immigrant women chasing easy money. His victims were often between 16 and 19 years old, young women whose disappearances would barely be noticed. His long, irregular hours at the bakery, combined with his obsession with hunting, kept his wife Darla from suspecting a thing. He saw himself as a hunter of the wild, and that identity became his ultimate pride. Robert abducted women, took them to isolated places, and sometimes released them under threats. Other times, he carried out the twisted fantasies he had been nurturing for years. He would release women into remote areas like the Nick River, then stalk them with his rifle as though they were wild game. In this sadistic hunt, he would finally kill them, turning murder into his most perverse form of sport. To Robert, these women were nothing more than animals to be hunted. For more than a decade, he evaded justice. During the investigations, the press labeled him the Butcher Baker. Under intense questioning, Robert confessed to killing 17 women, but only 12 bodies were ever recovered. He denied responsibility for some of the X marks on his map, insisting certain women were not his victims. His confessions were chilling, filled with disturbing justifications. He told authorities he only killed bad girls and never harmed good women. One of his statements was especially haunting. "They all became so valuable to me that I wanted their friendship. I wanted them to get along with me." Robert described his victim selection process in a grotesque, methodical way. He would sit in bars, watch dancers, and wait until one of them received an offer. To him, the moment they accepted money meant they were no longer good girls, and from then on, they became his next target. In the end, Robert attacked at least 30 women, killed somewhere between 17 and 21, but was convicted for only 4 murders. The Butcher Baker was sentenced to 461 years in prison, life without the possibility of parole. Cindy Paulson remained the only victim who escaped his killing plans. Because of her, Robert was finally caught and brought to justice. Cindy went on to rebuild her life. She left Anchorage, married, and had 3 children. Robert Hansen died in 2014, at the age of 75, from natural causes. Robert Hansen's terrifying story ends here. But remember, the world of true crime is always complex, unsettling, and thought-provoking. If you want to keep uncovering cases like this, learning new stories, and seeing the hidden side of justice, join our community. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think society can do to make sure people don't twist their education or passions, like sports or hobbies, into something dangerous? We're curious to hear your opinions. And until the next video, stay safe.